I'm delighted to be talking to Luke Thompson. Luke doesn't need much of an introduction because you probably already know him. He's the host of Luke's English podcast, which is the biggest, most popular podcast for English learners. Welcome, Luke. It's lovely to meet you.
Hi, Claire. Very nice to meet you too. Thanks for the nice introduction. Very nice to be here.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you, Luke. And just to let everyone know, Luke's also going to give a talk on how you can really learn vocabulary and not just stare at word lists at the Advanced English Summit. So, Luke, let's start at the beginning. Why is vocabulary important?
I suppose it's a fairly obvious answer, really. We need words, don't we, to be able to say the things we want to say. But people often will assume that grammar is the main thing. I think if there was a fight between grammar and vocabulary, I think that vocab would win, actually, because, try saying something without vocabulary. It's basically impossible.
Mm.
You can say something with no grammar, right? Like Tarzan did quite well. Me Tarzan, you Jane. Or if you just do it the Tarzan way, you can get the message across. But if so you can do it without grammar, but you can't really communicate anything without vocabulary. That's at a very basic level, right? But we're talking about getting to an advanced level in English. And so, vocabulary range is a really important thing. And this, people taking Cambridge exams will know that you're marked for your range of vocab. Also, appropriacy, knowing exactly which word to use for exactly the right idea in exactly the right situation. So it really allows you to have a lot more control. This helps you with fluency. It allows you to express different nuances. It allows you to say exactly what you mean and have the other person understand exactly what you mean.
Mm.
It makes it like a broad range of vocabulary makes you more interesting as a person. Vocabulary is very rich and very interesting, and there are many possibilities in English. Grammar and pronunciation are vital, of course, and vocab is married to grammar and pronunciation, but you can't say anything without vocabulary. And so that's obviously why it's important.
Yeah. And I think that the point that you make that at advanced level, your vocabulary has to be much richer. That's a really good point. And in fact, it's one of the big differentiators, isn't it, between levels? So it's, B1 level, you can sort of cope with everyday conversations. But by the time you get to C1, then you can speak with much more precision, can't you? You can, as you say, add nuance and you can add different layers. And what you end up having basically is a much more interesting conversation at advanced level.
Yeah, and it increases the number of things you can talk about. So that at
Yeah.
lower levels, a lot of it's focused on, the sort of the world around you or your own personal world, and that's reflected in, for example, if you take an IELTS speaking exam, where it's in three parts. The first part is quite personal. It's quite simple, really.
Mm.
And if you've got uh, pre-intermediate, intermediate level, you can deal with that, okay. But then when you get into the later parts of that speaking test, especially the third part, that's where you start talking about more abstract things. You start discussing issues and stuff like that, and you start to explore areas which are further away from yourself. And that's where you really need to be able to draw upon a wide range of vocab for all these different possible subjects. Yeah, so it's
Yeah.
vital, really, in that situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I get the impression, at least from listening to your podcasts, that vocabulary is something that you really focus on also as a teacher. So I imagine that you also enjoy teaching vocabulary.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. I mean, I like teaching all of the different systems, in English, but yeah, I love doing vocab, and I love as a teacher when I'm teaching a lesson and I see in whatever the material I'm using that I've got some vocab coming up, then I'm always happy about that, and I know it's going to go quite well, because personally as a teacher, I like the X. It's sort of like almost like a game for me to help my learners to really understand a word, to really get it. It's sort of like those games that we play at Christmas or something, where it's like a guessing game.
Mm.
You're trying to make someone think of a word, or you're trying, those different
Yeah.
sort of mental games that we play. And so teaching vocab for me is so fun for that reason, but also because a lot of the time it's not just about giving definitions of words and sort of providing definitions. That could be a bit dry and not necessarily the most useful way to help people learn words, but often it's about giving examples and demonstrating vocab in context and sort of showing people, rather than telling people what a word means, you show them what a word means.
Yeah.
And that can be really good fun. And I like to kind of do funny examples and act out my examples a little bit. And that can be just, really good fun thing to do. It allows me to do a bit of acting, a bit of comedy,
which is
and
of course your thing as well, as as the thing
yeah,
is stand-up.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it can be really good fun, and I just like the world of vocab, and also the lexical approach is a really kind of a good way of looking at learning English. I think that you can actually see English as groups of words that kind of go together. Rather than grammar rules, that is an approach that you can take, and it's definitely works for learning and teaching English. I think to see it as a sort of lexical system.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I think that, the lexical approach and learning, I mean, my big thing is learning fluency phrases, which, help you to build your conversations. And one of the things I love particularly about English vocabulary is the extent of it, is the richness of it. And in fact, one of my students told me the other day, and I thought this was a lovely thing he said, is that he's beginning to appreciate how words have their own spirit, have their own soul, because a word has a specific feel about it. And that's, I think, one of the most exciting things about vocabulary, how it makes you feel and how you can paint a picture, and a very precise picture, through the choice of words that you use.
Yes, absolutely. And the way they sound as well.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
words have got so many dimensions. It's the meaning, it's the form, the spelling, and the sound that those words make. And some words can be very beautiful, and that's very interesting in itself. The sort of linguistics behind the beauty of words, and that's all the different sounds that the certain combinations of sounds make words beautiful. So yeah, and also some words can be kind of harsh and hard. I mean, you look at swear words, for example. Not that I'm going to say any of them now, but it's very interesting the kind of the sounds that they have, and so yeah, there's many different things to enjoy about words. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So moving on now to how other people experience learning vocabulary, what mistakes do you think that people make when they learn vocabulary?
Well, like in the title of my talk, I think I often see learners, my students in class, and they're making an effort. They've decided to keep a notebook, or they're trying to keep vocab lists. But so many times I look over their shoulder, and I just, like, the typical student will have a list of English words, often just single words, and then next to them just like a translation in the first language, which obviously is, I understand the reason why people do that, because it's just the quickest, most efficient way of recording vocab, right? Because let's be honest, you don't always have time to write out all the possible things you can write. And so just naturally, you just assume that a translation is going to be the quickest way. But, words and phrases don't always translate perfectly. That can lead you to all those problems that you can have with false friends. And it also means that you're not taking into account all the other possible, all the other important things that you have to note in order to really remember words and give yourself a chance to use them again. There are so many things. And if we're talking about keeping a vocab notebook, doing it in English is definitely, it takes a bit longer, but ultimately it's better for you. And there's lots of so many other things you could write in your vocab notebook. Those are
Mm,
some of the things I'm going to talk about in my talk. You know, we talk about things like examples,
yeah.
little mnemonics to help you remember,
Mm,
um, pronunciation notes. It doesn't have to be the phonemic script, although that's probably the best way.
mm,
Um, you know, synonyms and antonyms,
yeah.
collocations. You know, how does that word fit into a sentence? What's the what words often go before and after it?
Yeah.
Are prepositions involved? You know, and just adding a bit more detail can actually
Yeah.
make a huge difference. It brings the words to life. It makes it much more memorable. And while if you approach words in that way, you're more likely to stick words together, you know, and that's actually how we remember them. You know, you take
Yeah.
a word and you put it into a network of other words, and that sort of reflects the way the brain works in a way that it sort of you make connections to things by establish. You know, you remember things when you connect them to things you already know.
Exactly. When you can see patterns as well.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with everything you've said. And, I also ask my students to think about how the word is used. Is it formal? Is it informal? Is it particularly American or particularly British? Because how you use the words is going to be important, isn't it? You
mm.
mentioned swearing. I mean, there are lots of contexts where swearing is perfectly fine, and lots of contexts where, perhaps not so fine. Yes.
Yeah. All these dimensions, as you said, yeah,
Yes.
sort of like
Yeah.
a is it more formal? Is it often used in a more formal setting? Is it more sort of like colloquial? Does the word have a sort of pejorative feel to it?
Mm,
Is it if you're using this word to describe someone, does that, for example, if you're describing someone's personality, does that have a negative sense? And can you say
mm.
the same thing but in a more with a more positive spin? You know,
Yeah,
there's just so many different connections you can make. The more you do, the more connections you make and more dimensions you understand with a word and note them down, the more chance you're giving yourself of remembering and using those words again and using them
yeah.
correctly.
I think it's because your brain tells you, doesn't it, that this is really important because you're making such an effort with that word and thinking about how you use it, how you say it, how the words, partner with other words. Doing all that is quite time consuming. We're not talking about a quick translation here, and I think that tells your brain, listen out for this. This is an important thing, and you give yourself more chances to
Yeah.
actually remember. Yeah.
I think also another mistake that people make sometimes is they assume that every word that they've been given or every word that they've found, they have to remember and
Mm,
understand every single one. It's basically 100% or it's nothing. You know,
mm,
people to an extent, I think with learning English like any other language, you have to allow for a certain amount of ambiguity or a certain level of failure as well. So if my students get a word list, I think sometimes they feel like if I can't remember all of these, then I've failed. But it doesn't really matter. You can just if you remember 50% of that word list, then that's still success. That's
yeah.
still a success. So it's sort of like, remembering anything is better than, it doesn't have to be 100% or nothing.
No,
Yeah.
no. I think it's also your choice, isn't it, to decide which words you're going to actively learn, that words that you want to become, part of your active vocabulary and words that you're happy just to be able to recognize. And, we talk about passive versus active, and certainly my passive vocabulary is much bigger than my active vocabulary. I don't use all the words that I know. I only use the words I'm, comfortable with, I'm familiar with. And I think, as you say, it's a mistake to think you've got to learn everything because, there isn't enough time, I think, more
Yeah.
than anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I just would add one other thing, which is just two other things really, I suppose. The importance of consuming a lot of English, like
Mm,
reading a lot and listening a lot, because obviously there's a whole school of thought, a whole academic approach, which says that this is actually the best way to increase your vocabulary is just by input. The
mm,
more
mm,
the more you read, the more you listen, and especially if you're particularly engaged and interested in the things that you're reading and listening to, then you sort of flood your brain with a lot of words, and through exposure and through repetition of seeing certain words again and again and again, you just sort of naturally start to
mm.
acquire vocabulary. So that's also a really important thing. You've just got to be actively involved in um, absorbing English as much as possible. So there's the sort of passive approach like that, and then there's the more active, considered approach where you can be, playing, also not only noting things down, but the approach you take when you look at your notes, and thinking outside the box a little bit, finding ways to test yourself, ways to jog your memory, just little things, even just like if you've got an example sentence, just putting your finger over the words, or just covering parts of a page and sort of like seeing if you can remember, and then uncovering it and seeing if you've got it right. And personalization is the second thing as well. Actually using words that you're learning. So not just writing them down and noting them and then staring at the lists, but actually trying to then turn it into productive practice where you've got a list of words and then you can actually try and start using them. And this is where things like actually chat GPT can be really useful, because you've got your word list and you just say to chat GPT, can you give me some fun conversation questions using all of these words, and bang, it does it for you. And often with ChatGPT or other AI, often those questions can be a bit dry and a bit weird sometimes. But all you need is to have a bit of imagination and creativity, and you can just kind of go off on some monologue, based on I don't know what the phrase is. If it's like to look forward to something, that might be one of your phrases, and ChatGPT will say, is there a holiday coming up that you're looking forward to? And then you just say, yeah, I'm really looking forward to my trip to the south of France this year, or I'm looking forward to my birthday. That's a phrase everyone knows, but
but it's
using
not
it.
always easy to replicate, is it? But the more practice you get, and in fact, yes, it's lovely that you mentioned ChatGPT. Try to say that word again, ChatGPT, because it's a huge resource and it's for free and it sort of condenses everything from the internet. So it's a massive resource for learning vocabulary. And that kind of leads me on to my next and actually final question for you. What else can people do to expand their vocabulary more effectively? You've mentioned ChatGPT. I'll say it again, ChatGPT. This is something I'm normally right rather than say. But apart from that, what other ways are there for people to expand their vocab?
So I could talk about some different tools that people can use. So ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot is another one, which is another free one. It's like the Microsoft version, and you can just Google Microsoft Copilot, and you'll go there, and it's another chat bot. It actually uses ChatGPT 4 as its base programming, whereas the free version of ChatGPT is actually ChatGPT 3. So I don't know. The paid version of ChatGPT is ChatGPT 4, but there's like a way to get in the back door through Microsoft Copilot.
Right. Good tip there.
Yeah, so Copilot's also a really good one. You can just like use either of them. So there's them, and there's many ways you can use them. I mean, you can use them as dictionaries. That's not my favorite way of using them, but really, what you want, I suppose, is something that will give you lots of examples. And generative AI is brilliant at doing this. This is what it's best at. In fact, this is what its main raison d'etre is, to produce language. So you can tell ChatGPT to give you examples of words, and it will do that just forever, and that's great for practice. And there's so many things you can do with those word lists. You can take them, you can gap fill them, whatever. Also, it will give you questions that you can use for discussion practice. But there are other resources too. Of course, the classic dictionaries are just amazing. And my favorite ones are like Collins Dictionary, Oxford Learner's Dictionary, the Cambridge Dictionary of Advanced English, I think it is, Longman Dictionary, the Macmillan Dictionary. So Cambridge, Oxford, Collins, Longman, Macmillan, they all have free dictionaries online, and they will give you obviously the definitions of words and all the many definitions there are. It'll tell you the part of speech. It'll give you the pronunciation. often in both American and British English, in phonemic script, but also in audio. There's an audio file for them. They'll give you example sentences. They'll give you, so much information. So, people, I don't know why people don't use dictionaries all the time.
Now,
But
I am a fan of dictionaries. I used to work for Longman actually, and
oh,
so
really?
I'm a particular fan of Longman dictionaries. That's my loyalty, obviously. But
Yeah.
also, what I liked about Longman dictionaries is that they have a 2,000 words sort of lexis. So all the words that they have are described and explained using just 2,000 words. They're sort of like the most frequent words. So that means that the definition of the word is never going to be more complicated than the word itself. They're very, very sort of user-friendly in that respect. They're excellent dictionaries, but obviously the other dictionaries are brilliant. And we also obviously have the American ones, the Merriam-Webster dictionaries. They're also excellent. Yes, it's perhaps an underused resource. Yeah.
And there are also other types of dictionary. It's not just your standard dictionary. Obviously, English dictionaries we're talking about here at this level. That's what you should be using, everyone, in my
But that's a
opinion.
monolingual, not the bilingual dictionaries you're talking
Monolingual.
about.
So rather
Yeah.
than if you're French, for example, rather than using an English-French translation dictionary, but just English. And in Longman, the Longman language activator is amazing.
Yes, I remember when that came out.
Yeah, really. I've got one on the shelf here.
Oh, yes, I love the activator.
So the Longman language activator is just amazing. It's just a new way to organize words, essentially. So let's say if you're looking at the word listen, what the activator does, it lists other related phrases that sort of fall under that sort of topic or semantic area, right? So you got listen, you got pay attention, listen out, or listen out for something, to listen in on someone's conversation, to eavesdrop, to bug someone's apartment or bug someone's telephone, to tap someone's phone,
Yes.
to monitor someone, to hack, listen up as well. A listener, an audience, to be a good listener, so to tune into something. So that's a really good way of sort of like exploring related, words that have related meanings. Another one, which is not Longman, that's a competitor, is the Oxford Collocations Dictionary. And again, this will just sort of tell you words that go with other words. So I don't know, if I try and find listen again, you can see how fast I can find words, not very fast. We'll see what the kind of collocations it has for that. So listen, so it gives you the adverbs like listen actively, listen attentively, listen carefully, listen closely, listen hard, not listen hardly. No, listen hard, listen intently, and it gives you verb plus listen. Nobody will listen to me. I tried to listen. She wouldn't listen. Did not bother to listen. She didn't bother to listen. You need to listen, should listen, be prepared to listen, be willing to listen, refuse to listen, and listen for, listen to. It gives you the prepositions and phrases like listen with one ear, which is apparently an American English expression, which means you're not fully listening. So
I think I've heard that, to listen with one ear.
yeah.
But then you also have listen, it goes in one ear and comes out the other. Yeah, so it's like a tunnel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like talking to my 6-year-old daughter about her homework. I'm saying, so, you've got to make sure you do your homework after school today, before we pick you up. And it goes in one ear, it goes out the other ear.
But yes, you're right. Collocations are, I think, absolutely vital because they also help with fluency. You're not sort of searching around to find that word that goes with the word you're using. And the activator, I mean, it's so much more than a thesaurus, which, we use as, just for synonyms. It's all the other phrases. So, the problem, I think, with a lot of learners is that you don't know what you don't know. So you don't know lots of synonyms for listen. You don't know the phrase for to listen with one ear, for example. And this is where these dictionaries really, really help.
Yeah, when you start getting into something like this, suddenly, pew, all these other words and phrases open up, reveal themselves to you. And again, you're not going to remember them all, but that doesn't matter. You don't have to remember them all, but you do need to be present. You need to be at the party, as it were.
Yeah.
Right. You've got to be there. And we talked before about the importance of personalizing and using language, because if you don't use it, you lose it, right? You've got to keep trying to use these things. And I'll mention as well pronunciation, which is obviously really important, because you've got to know what words sound like and how to actually make them with your voice, how to say those words. And that's something that's really important too. And so you need sort of spoken samples of vocab. And another resource which lots of people will know about is youglish.com. You know about this, I guess, because it's so useful and brilliant. Youglish is basically a way to search YouTube videos for samples. So you just go onto youglish.com, Youglis.
Yeah, it's you as in you and me. Yeah.
Yeah. So instead of English, it's Youglish. And then there's a search bar, and you can just search for a word or phrase, and it will just give you video sample after video sample after video sample of people using that phrase. And you can skip back and see the greater context of the word.
Yeah.
It provides you with subtitles. You can actually filter your search with American English, Australian English, British English, Irish English, or everything. And that's just a really great way of hearing people using words just naturally, not even, and they're just using them in some other situation. They're not there to teach you. So you hear words just being used in a very sort of like everyday way. And you hear them being squashed. And
I was about to say, that's the important thing, isn't it? Because when you hear words in context, they're not single words. You're talking about words in a sentence or in a phrase. So if they're spoken fast, then they're going to change their sound very often. And I think that's one of the problems people have when they listen. The word that they are hearing is not a word they recognize from just the audio. They'll recognize it if they saw it written down, but spoken, it's going to change form a little bit. And that's, I think, a really big challenge at all levels, but also at advanced level. You don't recognize the word because it's changed its pronunciation because of the words before or after. Yeah, very interesting. Lovely resources.
Definitely. I won't say more, because I'll end up saying all the things I'm going to say in the talk.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to get the rest of all these fantastic strategies for learning vocabulary effectively, then do come along to Luke's talk. So Luke is going to be talking on Thursday, the 18th of April at 10 a.m. UK time. So a little bit of background information about the Advanced English Summit. It's a 3-day online event from Wednesday, the 17th of April to Friday, the 19th of April. It's for you if you are already at an intermediate level, but you want to get further, you want to get to advanced English level. There will be 10 talks by English teachers, podcasters, and coaches, including Luke. And the talks are going to be on improving your speaking, your listening, your vocabulary, your grammar, and your writing, and also to help you pass English exams. The Advanced English Summit is completely free. All the talks take place on Zoom, and you also get the recordings afterwards. To get your invitation to come to the Zoom talks, you do need to sign up, and the sign up page is smartenglishcoach.com/summit, and I will put this link in the comments for you. So, Luke, thank you once again. This was a really, really interesting talk, really useful for people, how you can learn English, but learn English really effectively. And I'm really looking forward to your talk.
Yeah, me too. Thanks very much for inviting me. And for those people who will be there, I'll see you there.
Thank you very much indeed, Luke. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.